Welcome, everyone, to the F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show. This is not our normal night of recording. We do not have our normal guests, as Dave Eddy is here. Dave, we're very happy to have you. Joe Matz is going to jump on a few. I've been on the DFS Den a couple of weeks with you recently, and I really appreciate you offering to come on and kind of help us look over what I think is going to be a pretty tough slate this week.
Yeah, I think it has. We talked about this. I think it's got shades of last week written all over it. I mean, some differences obviously, but it really does remind me of last week's slate.
Which, again, my apologies for Bijan. That's 100%.
I didn't play him, so it doesn't matter. I did end up.
That makes me feel better.
No, I did put him into a single entry tournament though. My single entry lineup, I did have him, but I couldn't go there for cash. And I told you that on Friday, and I told you that on Sunday. I said, I just
wanted to make sure because I felt really guilty.
Well, you should
screw Arthur Smith, and God, if they could just fire him, that would be it'd make me a lot happier. Joe, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, sorry for the delay, guys. I'm house sitting for these dogs. One of them's diabetic, and I have to give her an insulin shot right after she eats. So naturally, I put her food out an hour ago, and she didn't eat till 10 minutes ago. So,
did they force you to wear the Twins hat, or is that by choice?
No, that's by choice. Which it hurts less this year than every year for the last 20 years.
Tell Dave who your football team is. It's been a rough year for.
Oh yeah, that's the rough one. Is the New York?
He's a Giants fan too.
Wow, so Keith Lott, and I guess that speaks volumes to both of you guys. I don't know. To be fair, if you just go back a few months, I mean, a Lions fan has got it as worse as anybody in the history of sports.
For sure.
So, I mean, I can make fun of you for now because, we're actually good for the first time in my life.
Very happy for you guys, though. I really am. I know, but
I've been around for hot starts that have turned into absolutely nothing. So this feels different. I think this is different.
It does.
But
number one seed's in play. Legit, I think the number one seed. Well, the Eagles got such a tough schedule. The Niners have already got one extra. I really do think that with y'all's schedule, you get home field would be huge too.
Getting home field for Lions would be huge. However, the number one seed doesn't really guarantee you much of anything. Still got
one round, right?
Yeah, I mean, still at some point are going to have to beat either Philly or San Francisco to get anywhere worthwhile. So. I mean, I'll take the number one seed. Don't get me wrong. Lions are a much better team at home. I don't know who isn't. Listen, man, I'm just looking for an NFC North title, and then we go from there, So
for one step at a time, right?
Oh, that's God. Right. Well, listen, with you've got 40 years of constant disappointment. I mean, honestly, 7-2 is my next goal. I'm not even. I mean, jeez.
All right, well, since we got Dave on here, we're going to do it slightly different. We will still, don't get me wrong, we'll give you, the guys that we're thinking about, but I really want to have more of an open discussion. One of the things I've really enjoyed being on the DFS Den the last few weeks, and then just getting to know Dave in general, is just having, for me, almost like college level discussions on DFS, which is great, especially for cash game people like us. And that's kind of what I want to do today is we'll just kind of go position by position and kind of, discuss what we're thinking. The QB position, kind of tough this week. Dave, why don't you start us off? What are you looking at right now? I know it's early in the week, but what's your first thoughts?
Yeah. Are we talking just strict cash on this?
Yeah. I mean, or, whatever, we'll take any information from you, Dave, that we can get. So you just kind of go in whatever direction you want to go.
I think the obvious cash play for me at this moment, and this is probably even with the Chase news, is Joe Burrow. I think he really stands out to me as, I mean, not technically the best value, but right up there, but also with probably, the highest ceiling on the slate as well. That's probably where I'm going to go. It's also hard to shy away from Sam Howell I mean, Seattle's been pretty bad against quarterbacks. Seattle 25th schedule adjusted fantasy points to quarterbacks. Now Burrow's not that far behind against Houston. Houston's 21st. But there's obviously a much higher upside there with Burrow. Unfortunately, I kind of got my eye on Geno Smith a little bit too. I don't think I'll play him. But he's going up against Washington, who is 30th in schedule adjusted fantasy points to QB. So all three good matchups. The $100 difference between Howell and Geno oftentimes is irrelevant. But there was one lineup that I was looking at earlier today where that $100 does make a difference. It did allow me to slip in something that made my lineup a lot better. I didn't really like going from Howell to Smith. I actually think that's quite a downgrade. But it was interesting to see the ancillary pieces and how they worked out. But I'm able to fit pretty much everything I want to play with Burrow. So I think that's where I'm going. You mentioned Dobbs earlier. I think Dobbs is interesting. I don't think I need the salary though. I'm going to play with it because I didn't play with Dobbs at all earlier. So I'm curious if the $400 between Dobbs and Howell will make some sort of a difference. I don't think it will with who I'm locked in on. So it's probably Burrow for me this week.
Yeah, that's the same direction I would. On this show, we technically, and again, you don't have to follow our rules, but we give plays, 6,900 or below at each position. So Burrow, thank God.
Oh, 60. Okay, I thought it was 59. Okay,
I'm
good.
It's perfect.
No, yeah, 69. So he's right at that level, but I'm with you. And it's even worse than it's been for, honestly, this Texans defense because, just looking at some of the guys that have had really good games. I mean, Baker scored 19 points. Carr scored 20. Desmond Ridder scored 29. And then that Richardson-Minshew combo almost scored 30 points in a game that Richardson got knocked out. He had a good start to the game, then got knocked out. I'm with you on Sam Howell, who continues to be kind of a value just because he throws so much. Joe mentioned it. Joe mentioned it a couple of weeks ago that doesn't matter if he gets sacked like every 5 times he drops back because he's just going to keep on chucking. But I do just because I did the research on Dobbs. It's I like it because I think that his floor is relatively high. He's since week 3, 6th among quarterbacks and fantasy points per game, just over 19. He scored 12 or more in all those games. The big thing, again, rushed for 40 yards or more in 6 of his last 8, scored a rushing touchdown 3 straight. We know we love those. And then the big thing is just it's not a huge sample size, but it is a sample size that the Saints have had issues with running quarterbacks. Tyson Bagent for the Bears last week, he rushed for 70 yards. I mean, that's kind of an outlier. But the bigger ones are Trevor Lawrence, who is 7th among QBs in rushing yards this season. He rushed for 59 yards. That was by far his highest rushing total of the season versus his defense. Jordan Love is 10th among QBs. He rushed for 39 yards, which was, I think, like 12 yards higher than he had in any game, on the ground. And then same thing with Bryce Young, who I think his highest total was like 14 yards, and he actually rushed for 34 yards in that game. And Dobbs is the second leading, rusher among QBs by a pretty wide margin. Obviously, we know the one guy above him is Lamar, but I really like, again, Burrow, and then Dobbs would be the other guy. Joe, who are you looking at this week at the QB?
100% with you guys on Joe Burrow. My only concern is T. Higgins also apparently tweaked his hamstring today.
Oh, great.
So I would just monitor the wide receiver room there. As long as one of those guys is good, I feel perfectly fine at Joe Burrow under 7,000 against a Houston team that just got carved up by Baker and the Bucks. I also very much Howell and Geno. That Washington defense is one I'm starting to target just because I think you remove the 2 starting pass rushers on a team that wasn't exactly shutting it down before. I feel good about that. And then if I feel good about Geno for those reasons, again, it's another reason to feel good about Howell because he's going to drop back 40 times. Going real low, I'm probably going to be throwing Baker Mayfield in some lineups against Tennessee.
Yeah, the Tennessee there.
Yeah, it's only 5,100. And then I think Tennessee is one of those teams where if you look at their DK rating against quarterbacks, I think it's a little bit of fool's gold there. 3 touchdowns allowed in their last 5 games, but that was Burrow before he got back to being Joe Burrow, Gardner Minshew, Lamar Jackson, who also, of course, ran for 60 yards in that game. Heineke, I believe it was Heineke, or correct me if I'm wrong on that one, Keith. Either way, Heineke or Ritter. And then Kenny Pickett last week. So it's not a murderer's row there. And again, you go by DVOA, which is taking into account the quality of your opponents. 24th pass defense, 8th rush defense. So again, it's a team that funnels the opposing offense towards the pass. So I like Baker Mayfield as well if you're trying to go for a real low value.
It was technically both, Joe, to answer your question. That was the game.
Perfect. There we go. That was the switch.
He played the second. So you were right there. The running back position, guys, keep circling two guys, and I can't wait to hear what Dave says, because Dave is, in my opinion, one of the best at getting that expensive guy correct. Jacobs last week. He didn't like that insulin shot, Joe. But the two backs I'm looking at are Aaron Jones at Pittsburgh. We finally saw his usage go up, so I'm assuming that means maybe he's finally healthy. He saw 24 touches last week, had a second highest scoring day for DraftKings, but that was by far his highest touch total of the season. He had not seen more than 11 touches in any previous game of the season, which is just wild. And then the other thing is just you have been able to get at this team, the Pittsburgh team, in the passing game as well, with running backs, with like Derrick Henry had 3 receptions, Travis Etienne had 3 receptions, the Henderson-Freeman combo had 4, the Justice Hill Gus Edwards had 4. And then the other guy that I like even more, especially with the news of, some of the injuries on the Bengals side, is just Joe Mixon, who's just volume. I mean, 20-plus touches over the Bengals' last 4 games, and each of them, we know since the bye, this is a much different offense, so it's no surprise Mixon is, starting to score more points than DK. I believe he's had his 2 highest scoring games of the season back-to-back. But the big thing, 30 rush attempts the last 2 weeks, and then 8 receptions on top of that. So you're talking about 19 touches per game, almost 200 yards, scored a touchdown in both of them. And again, this is a Texans D that they've really kind of struggled with, those true 3-down backs, the guys that both run the ball and catch passes. Rachaad White was the number 1 running back in all of DFS last week versus the same defense. Kamara and Etienne both scored 17-plus points against them. And then Zach Moss, when Jonathan Taylor was not involved in the Colts, he was a true 3-down back at that time for the Colts. He had 20 points versus this defense. The issues for me is going like the cheaper ones. I'm leaning right now to Jaylen Warren, hoping there's maybe some upside, but I'm still really leery about just the touches and stuff. He has seen at least a 48% snap share in each of the last 5 games, which that's good. He's getting on the field more. He saw his season high in carries and touches last week with 11 and 14. He's kind of got a high floor for a guy in this price range, because he scored double digits in 5 out of the last 6 games. Unlike Najee, you can just have the absolute just like 4-pointer. You seem to at least get about 10 points out of Warren even when he doesn't do much. It's just the issue is he hasn't had really any big games. But I do like, again, he's caught 3 or more passes in 7 of 8. And it just seems like eventually the Steelers are going to have to start giving him the ball more, because, among running backs, he's 10th in yards per touch, 4th in juke rate, 3rd in yards created per touch, 14th in evading tackles. When compared with Najee Harris, it's not even close, but they still seem to, I don't know, want to split it or whatever. But where are you kind of looking this week, Dave?
It started off very obvious, Joe Mixon right off the bat. His price is, it's fine compared to where he has been all year, but I think it's too low. Up until the last few weeks, he had been right at the very top of, running back share, numbers. And volume is king. Volume over matchup is something I preach all the time. And so especially, and this was before I really had considered and got to the receivers. And so now, I think that Mixon is a guy that I already have him locked in. We'll see what happens. I don't know, barring an injury from him, I don't see how he's not in my lineup. The other guy that was high on my list, he's a little bit out of our price range here, But Travis
Well,
Etienne,
we want to hear him though. Trust us. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
Travis Etienne, I've got him locked in right now too. I mean, he's had at least 3x each of the last 4 weeks, and from talking to me, that's where I'm looking. I'm looking for 3x and above. That's a big number for me, and he's been solidly above that. Rashad White is on this list too. I don't think I like him quite as much as the projections. He is going up against that Tennessee rush defense who, has been pretty good all year, but the way he's been catching the ball lately, we're kind of stealing points, right? The cheat code portion of the running backs. But
and he did that last year. It was kind of surprising he had not done it this year until the last few games. That was why he was so valuable in DFS last year down the stretch. Sorry, not to interrupt you.
No, but he gets so many snaps and he's going to get opportunities. I don't know that I'm going to actually end up there, but I very well might. And then I'm actually on the other side of the Pittsburgh thing. I'm actually more on Najee. Well, I don't know. He's in my list, right? For 4,900, I've got him and Warren. They're $100 apart. I've got them projected for basically the same exact thing. So realistically, you could flip a coin. Right. But I think that for cash, I think Najee's floor is a little bit higher. He does get more work, so he gets more volume. That gives him more opportunity.
More red zone touches.
Regardless of the real life situation, to say, well, Jalen Warren's the more explosive player. That's fine and dandy, but until Mike Tomlin agrees, it is what it is, right? So I mean, Najee's on the borderline of if I need to save the cash, he's an option. He gets his way into some of my lineups this week, and I don't like it. But we'll see what happens. And then, my saying, with CMC, death taxes and playing CMC when he's healthy in cash. I haven't really gotten to that point at this juncture because I'm playing Mixit, I'm playing ETN. I could still play CMC if I wanted. I haven't really dug into adding Joshua Dobbs into the mix. So I'm kind of curious. With that in play, if I were to start forcing CMC in there, what that looks like. I very well might end up doing what I did last week and going 3 stud running backs and figuring out the rest. Because at this moment, I'm kind of locked into playing Amon-Ra at wide receiver, but maybe I can pivot to CMC with, the Dobbs savings and see what I get, play instead of punting at, pretty much punting at 2 receiver spots. Maybe I either punt at 1 or I just have a really balanced wide receiver build. We'll see.
Joe, what are you thinking, buddy?
It's interesting that you guys both talked about the Pittsburgh guys because when I was doing research trying to figure out who my lower tier guy was, those are the 2 guys I was going back and forth on because, I agree with most people who are outside the Steelers organization that Jalen Warren looks like he's the better running back. And then Green Bay has given up a decent amount of receptions to running backs, 44 on the year. Week 1 against the Bears, 11 receptions to running backs. So that obviously speaks well to Warren. But at the same time, there's a lot of reasons to believe this is going to be a more run-oriented game. The Packers' offense has not looked good at all for basically since.
Don't trust the Packers were getting a lead versus the Steelers. Probably a safe play.
Yeah. I mean, of course, like everyone gets a lead against the Steelers and then finds a way to lose.
League.
So I don't know.
You know what I mean?
But yeah, so I think there's a reason to think that this is potentially a more run-heavy game. There's not.
Green Bay's top 10 across the board. Quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, top 10 schedule adjusted in fantasy points, and then the outlier is their 23rd against running back. So the running game would be where we'd want to attack there.
Yeah. So like you said, I think you can kind of coin flip it. I really like either of those guys. Not really much to add, but yeah, Joe Mixon makes a ton of sense, especially when you're throwing in the wide receiver injuries. And then, no one wants to do it because you never know what you're going to get. But I still like Bijan at 6,000 against Arizona.
Oh, Joe, don't do it, Joe.
I still like it.
Don't do it, buddy.
Nope.
I still like it.
Not a chance. Not in cash. MME, I guess, knock yourself out. But cash.
If you want to, that's fair. In a cash game, probably not. But yeah, if you're going into a larger tournament,
probably not. Dave tried to talk me last week. I didn't listen. I had my worst losing.
You're right. Mixon's like $200 more. So just go with Mixon if you're in a cash game. But yeah, if you're trying to, find a way to get an advantage on people in a larger tournament, listen, I mean, PFF has this O-line versus D-line. They have the advantage in Atlanta's favor in the run game, 91%. The only other team that's above 21%, according to their numbers on the advantage, is the Lions against the Chargers.
That only matters.
Well, that could be an Algier thing. So, yeah, it could end up being you should actually play Algier.
It might be an Algier stat, if anything.
Maybe Jonnu Smith will get a couple rushing touchdowns.
That's right. Cordell Patterson's going to lead the backfield and carries this week.
The point is, someone should do well in that game. Will it be Bijan? Who knows? But I do think it's worth a flyer in a larger pool. No, but yeah, in cash games, I'm not going to try to talk anyone into Bijan over Joe Mixon because you save $200.
I mean, if you want to get a little goofy and like a milli, you could go Bijan and Warren, and those could be your running backs. You're unique right off the bat. You play all the chalk you want at that point,
Yeah, exactly.
Would you if you did something like that? Would you have CMC in that lineup, or is that too chalky to go with?
If you're playing Bijan and Warren, I think you can throw. I think you can throw ownership right out the window. I mean, the way that I build my MME is I basically have a rule that says at least a minimum of 2 guys 5% or under, a maximum of 4, and I would expect that we're probably going to get Warren and maybe Bijan under that 5%. So once I've hit that threshold, I no longer give a shit about ownership. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Joe, we'll let you start off with the receivers. Who are you looking at? Because this has been the position, honestly, I've had the hardest time with this week.
Agree.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Especially, I mean, I was looking at T. Higgins really hard, and now with the shaky hamstring, I don't know. If he suits up, Chase doesn't, then I'll risk the hamstring. I mean, 6,500 with Joe Burrow against a defense that, again, we just saw get carved up. But, similarly, looking at Mike Evans, larger guy. So I really like T if he's good to go. DeAndre Hopkins, that Tampa Bay defense, speaking of the shootout game, I'm not sure exactly what's going on with their corners this year, but not playing up to what they have been in the past. Hopkins is obviously the go-to guy in that Tennessee offense, and Will Levis is willing to. I mean, he can chuck it 50 yards downfield off his back foot. So
I mean, so can I, but I don't know.
I cannot. So props to you.
I can't either.
And then
but I can't throw a football.
And then, like we mentioned earlier, a game I really like is that Washington-Seattle game. So to me, DK has been the best against man coverage this year. That is, they're top 10 in running man in Washington. So DK is probably the first guy I go with, but I feel fine if you want to play Lockett instead.
Wait till you hear my Seattle wide receiver take then.
Well, that's who I'm over. That makes you feel good, I think. I think I'm in the right direction.
And then Terry McLaurin, I think as long as we're getting Terry McLaurin under 6,000 and there's 40 dropbacks a game for Washington, I'm going to feel good about
that's 10
Terry
targets,
McLaurin.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So those are guys. And then, hey, if Kyler's back, especially, which hopefully it sounds like he is, Marquise Brown, 5,200. I think you're getting a legit quarterback now to throw you the ball. I'm feeling a lot better about Marquise, who's been pretty productive with Dobbs. And, obviously Tune was rough last week, but that was against the Cleveland defense as well, which they're not facing this week. So, those are a lot of the guys I'm looking at. I wish I could say something about throw Jalen Hyatt or Jerry Slayton in the lineup, but don't do anything with the Giants this week. Don't do anything.
David, sounded like you're kind of on the Jackson Smith train, which I was also. Is that one of the directions you were thinking about going this week?
Well, I mean, I don't force anything in cash. In MME, I'll force stuff, right? I'll say, hey, I really like Terry McLaurin this week, so I'm playing a Seattle receiver. Who's it going to be? And so at that point, I'll force a Smith and Jigba. In cash, I don't need to do that, obviously. But he is someone that maybe I don't have Metcalf or Lockett in my cash pool, but I do have Smith and Jigba. Am I going to go there? I don't know. He's not, currently in anything that I'm playing, but when I, play around with stuff and, when I'm trying to see what happens if I force, these 5 guys in, when I start forcing things in, that's when he starts popping in. because it's only $4,100.
Right.
Again, I don't know that I'll go there, but one of the things that I was thinking about, when Joe was talking, was he talked about DeAndre Hopkins, and I just have a feeling about DeAndre Hopkins this week. And man, I have the mind to say, you know what, I'm not going to play Amon-Ra with the Chase injury. It's taken me off of him. So I was just thinking, I was like, what if I just went down from Amon-Ra to Hopkins, and then I can now move that flex up to CMC.
Yeah.
And especially now that Dobbs is in play. So in reality, the first thing I'm going to do when we get done here is I'm going to look to see what happens if I plug in Mixon, ETN, CMC, Hopkins, and Dobbs. And I want to see what it kicks out because that actually sounds interesting. And I know the projections aren't going to like it as much necessarily, but I want to see what it surrounds it with. But we'll see what happens with Robert Woods. But I think Noah Brown is interesting again. He was a guy that I was very interested in last week. I just didn't have the guts to do it.
I was so mad because you brought him up both when we talked Friday and on the Sunday show, and I was so close to putting him in one of my $1 million lineups. Did I? Nah, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't need the savings, so I didn't go there. But as long as Woods is out again, I think that's interesting. Joe touched on Marquise Brown, touched on McLaurin. I don't need to go there. I think Amon-Ra is, if you're going to pay up at receiver, he's your guy. He doesn't have the same ceiling that, like a Chase would have, but his floor is literally as good as it gets. Yeah, no one's got a better floor. So Amon-Ra is like the prototypical cash play. You're spending $8,300 for him, so you need to get 25 points, but he's going to safely get you like 20, and then where do you go from there? So that's a good use of a lot of cash. If you still want to go Houston, but you don't want to take the chance on Noah Brown, I think Tank Dell is going to be just fine. And again, I don't force any sort of correlation whatsoever in cash, but if I play Burrow and I'm playing Mixon, if Tank Dell manages to work out and fit, the natural correlation there is always nice. Again, I'm not going to force it, but it does make me smile when it happens. I don't think Michael Wilson is out of play here either. You want to go with another guy cheap with Kyler coming back, assuming that, Michael Wilson is healthy. I mean, I would rather play Marquise Brown, but, $1,700 cheaper, obviously, if you need to save some money, maybe you don't like Noah Brown or whatever, there's an option there. We talked about Smith and Jigba, who's a little bit more. We talked about Hopkins. I think if you want to, you can always go back to Christian Kirk. I don't think his salary really fits what I'm going to be doing this week. More than likely, if I'm playing somebody in this neighborhood, it's going to be Hopkins. They're the same price. I'm not going to be able to afford both with paying up at running back. So he's probably not going to be a guy that I play, but I think he's viable. I think that's about where I sit.
Yeah, I like a lot of those. The Jackson Smith was definitely one of the two cheaper guys that I'm looking at this week, trying to kind of decide to give me a little bit more flexibility. He's running all kinds of routes now. If you look his first 4 games, they literally were just using him in short field situations. It was a very small route tree. They've opened it up the last few weeks. And 80% of his plays he ran routes on last week, by far the highest that he had thus far this season. I like the fact that he's scoring just over 13 points per game on DK the last 3 weeks. I think that would be wide receiver 24 just in points per game over that span. And he's caught 4 more passes in 3 or 4. And again, Washington's awful. The other guy, and Joe, you'll love this. I don't know how much Dave will love it because I'm not sure how he feels about one of our favorite things is the every other game theory.
Yeah.
And my man Rashid Shaheed is in the middle of every other game, and Minnesota is a team that gives up some big plays. He's had 3+ receptions, 3 straight games, much more involved, 21 targets the last 4 games after first 5. And he's just, again, 18 points week 6, 7 week 7, 27 week 8, 5 week 9. And I think this game could be a little bit more high scoring. And, the great thing about him is it only takes 1 play for him to have a monster game. The other guys I just wanted to bring up briefly is, Tennessee is a team we know that funnels balls to receivers. They've given up receptions. Do either one of those guys more appealing than the other to you? Because for me right now, it's Evans over Godwin, but do either one of y'all like either of those? And if so, which one?
No, I looked at them. I looked at them earlier because Tennessee is a team that, I found myself attacking, especially early in the season. And when I looked at both Evans and Godwin, I just moved right along.
Is it the price more than anything?
It's the production. Yeah, technically, if they were $100, then yeah, I'm very interested. So yeah, I guess technically it's the price, but
right.
Yeah, they're not gonna. I can't rely on either one of them to get me 3x, and that sucks because in years past, last 3-4 years, when healthy, Godwin was a perfect cash player, right? He would, he'd get just some ceiling games every once in a while, but man, that guy, he was good for a nice floor, 5 for 60.
He was.
And then what do you get after that, and that's just not the case right now.
If I'm picking one, I do think I would go Godwin. He's been much better against man than zone so far this season, and Tennessee is a top, I think, 10 or 11 defense in running man coverage versus zone. And Houston was a big zone coverage team. Chris Godwin, 2 catches, 16 yards last week. So yeah, to me, the fact that he's cheaper, he would be the guy to go with there. But yeah, probably not, again, to Dave's point, I don't know that I'm going with him in a cash game when, again, I like Metcalf more. He's $100 more. You can drop down, find some guys you like. But yeah, I think in a tournament game, again, he pairs with a super cheap quarterback. So yeah, I don't mind Godwin. I would probably steer clear of Evans at that price point.
I'll take it outside the box for you, and I will say K. Dotton. That's not a receiver, but if you want to say, hey, give me a pass catcher, I would rather have K. Dotton. But.
The tight end position this week is loaded. I love it.
Is the tight end position ever loaded?
I think this week
it's all relative
for the value. Yeah,
maybe it's loaded like a diaper. Full of shit.
Hey man, the last 2 weeks I've had 2 tight ends that have scored like over 45 points. So I want to keep riding that train while I can. I really if I can figure it out, and it's going to depend how it works out, I do think that Laporta needs to be looked at. Even though that 5,900 price, this is a awful team versus the tight ends. And the Chargers, 34 receptions allowed their last 3 games. If you look at every top tight end that has played them this year, they have had monster games. Travis Kelce, monster game. Tyler Conklin had 6 catches, 60 yards last week. He's not nearly as involved as he is. They've had 5 different tight ends catch 6 or more passes this year versus them. So I am going to be looking at him. I think it's just a great matchup. The price does worry me, but the lower price guys is what I love. The Falcons are awful versus tight ends. We talk about this all the time. McBride, 3,500, huge upgrade at QB. Yeah. He's going to torch them. He is going to absolutely torch Atlanta. We cannot cover tight ends. And McBride is arguably maybe the best athlete-wise tight end we've played yet. I think about Dalton Schultz, who had like 7 catches for, 90 yards and a touchdown versus us. I love that. And then I hate it because with the Chase and the Higgins injuries and stuff, I think more and more people are going to funnel to it. But Irv Smith Jr., 2,800. We talked about it last week. It was why K. Dotton was literally my only tight end that I played in any lineups. Texans were giving up over 9 targets per game and 7 receptions to opposing tight ends. And K. Dotton goes out and catches 6 passes for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Irv Smith, oh, by the way, finally caught a touchdown last week. He's starting to be a little bit more involved the last couple of weeks because he was just literally, there was missing signs on him early in the season. And he's only 2,800 this week. I definitely am considering him. But McBride is the one I think that just both safe floor and potential for just a huge boom game again versus Atlanta team that cannot cover tight ends.
Yeah, McBride's almost surely where I'll end up going. To some extent, I would love to be able to get to Hawkinson. I just think that instead of using that $1,500 difference, to go from McBride to Hawkinson, I think I would rather use that $1,500 difference, to go from like a Hopkins to an Amonra, or to go from whoever, I was going to put in the flex.
To get CMC.
Yeah, exactly, to get CMC. So in a perfect world, I would prefer to play Hawkinson, but it's just not going to work. So McBride's going to be my guy. Dalton Schultz is interesting. He's just too expensive. I have him around because if I was considering Hawkinson at that price, Schultz for $100 less is just my other, hey, if you want to pay up, but you don't want to pay up for Hawkinson, here's your guy. I'm not going to play him. He'll probably end up being out of my pool eventually, but I do like to give, people the option of saying, hey, if you want to pay up, you don't have to just play Hawkinson. You could go this, I always try to give a couple of options in the same area just to give people an idea. And then Logan Thomas is a guy that I always get drawn back to. The volume in that offense. He's a guy who's pretty consistently been around that 3X mark. But it's gonna almost surely end up McBride this week. I just don't see how I go a different direction,
Yeah, pretty much agree with you guys across the board. I think Laporta, when you look at the matchups, I don't know that there's a tight end I like more this week, like straight up regardless of price. I would take Laporta. I put him at least even with Andrews playing the Browns, and he's $1,200 cheaper. So if you want to go big, I like that. Yeah, the Schultz one, it's the 32nd defense on DK versus tight ends. He's had 33 targets the last four games. He's caught touchdown in 4 of the last 5.
Yep.
There's no reason not to like that. But yeah, I think most of my lineups, it's going to be McBride. Second in target not target share. Is it target share? Let me double check my numbers here. Target rate on the year. And obviously he wasn't always running every route because Ertz was around. But yeah, 27% target rate on the season. Now he has an actual, top 10, top 15 quarterback thrown to him. So, yeah, I think McBride at that price point is hard to go against. But, yeah, Irv Smith, though, if those wide receivers are out, 2,800.
And even if they're not, again,
that's a good call, Keith. Yeah, that's a good call.
They just give up targets and receptions to tight ends. It's insane.
Well, what I would say, honestly, is I think too often people have the mindset, and I'm not accusing you two. I'm just saying.
Sure, no, go.
But I think too often when, let's just say Chase is out theoretically, right? When Chase is out, everyone automatically goes, oh, well, T. Higgins. Obviously, it's going to be T. Higgins. Well, not necessarily, right? And even if you've got one or other out, or they're both at least hampered, it doesn't mean it's going to go Tyler Boyd or Trenton Irwin or Irv Smith. I think it goes to Joe Mixon. And I'm not saying in the passing game. I'm saying on the ground. I think they just say, we're going to give Joe an extra 5 or 6 touches. So, I'm very off of Irv Smith. I hate to tell you. I'm not playing Irv Smith in any format. But I would just say that if that's your rationale, I get it. But I would say that the benefactor is Mixon, not Irv Smith.
No, the reason
I would agree that's the
Texans,
one.
It's the Texans.
Well, yeah, it's safer
because again, he's seen he's seen basically half of his targets the last 2 weeks. He has, half of his receptions the last 2 weeks. And again, the Texans
because he's been hurt. He didn't play week 3 through 5.
I get that, but I'm saying again, Cade Otton had been okay, but not great, and then he plays his Texans defense and he goes bananas. It's just they for whatever reason, I'm not an X and O guys. They definitely funnel the ball to tight ends because it's absurd to be this far in the season and tight ends have almost 7 receptions per game against the defense.
29th schedule adjusted to tight end, so they definitely give it up.
The defense. Oh, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I think obviously if you're trying to go cheap at tight end, you feel much more confident you're going to get something out of Trey McBride than you are Irv Smith based on everything we've seen this year. But yeah, for whatever reason, you need that extra $700-800. To go get a McCaffrey, to get an Amon-Ra. Again, cash game, don't love it, but yeah.
No, I wouldn't do it in the cash.
If you're in the large, again, you're playing that $1 million one, a guy for $2,700, if one or two, or especially if it's both receivers, Mixon's going to be the guy I think clearly benefits the most. But yeah, Irv Smith against a defense that's awful against tight ends. Yeah, like I said, don't hate it. I'm not like all in on Irv Smith because I don't know that I've ever had a point in my life where I felt that way. But
We did
I
a
think it's
couple of
worth
years
that
ago.
roll of
If
the
I
dice.
remember, Joe, he got hurt in the first half. That's what happens.
The only time.
The defenses this week. Again, actually, Dave, since we got you on here and you haven't been on the show before, me and Joe have obviously told our theories. Why don't you kind of tell how you come up with your defense each week? What's your process?
Yeah, well, from a cash perspective, it's I want to spend as little money as possible. It is historically proven that salary does not correlate to production at defense. It does not. So I know for a fact you're going to have somebody who's going to go, oh my God, Cowboys against the Giants. Oh,
Yeah.
they're easily
Right,
going to get 15 points. And then, they're I mean, they might, but they're probably not,
And even then, we're barely 4-time, right? Like your price. So, to your point,
I would say that they probably get 15, but I still agree with the overall point.
Yeah, I mean, you need 13 points for them to make sense, and I'm never banking on anyone to get 13 points. So no, I'm not touching that. I'm not spending up on a defense. If I've got some money left over, like the two I'm looking at, I'm looking at either the Bengals or I'm looking at the Cardinals, and and then, to be fair, I do like the Cardinals better this week, even though they're a little cheaper. But if I felt the other way around, like, I don't remember if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, Joe. I think it was last week, right? I was much higher on the Patriots than I was on the Giants. However, there was a $500, $600, $700 gap or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was $600.
And so I could not get myself to the Patriots. I wanted to, but I couldn't. In this particular case, if I have $300 extra left over and I want to go Bengals, that's fine. But I'm not gonna. I would never force anything to say, you know what, like that example from whatever it was last week. In no situation was I ever gonna force the Patriots in there and downgrade at another position. It's too volatile.
Right.
Now, when we get to like an MME perspective, anyone that I was considering for cash is pretty much right directly out of my pool. I refuse to play chalk defense. Given the option, I would rather pay up an MME and play the Cowboys than play that Cardinals defense. I'm gonna, theoretically, I don't know what the Cowboys defense is going to be this week ownership wise, but that's a good place to get unique without really probably sacrificing anything, because you could put all these teams in a hat and you could pull one out, and that could be the highest scoring defense of that particular week. So I think that's a good spot in MME to kind of check one of my under 5% owned boxes, get a little bit unique there, and then, go about the rest. So that's how I approach it. Super cheap in cash and just try to basically get unique in MME.
Joseph?
I mean, obviously we generally agree with the don't spend money strategy.
Yeah.
I'm also zeroing in on the Bengals. I'm kind of hopeful that a lot of people are going to be off of this just because of all the CJ Stroud hype right now, which I don't blame anyone for that. CJ Stroud's been awesome. Last week was incredible. But you have one of the best defensive coordinators in football, Lou Anarumo. I think this Bengals defense is good. I just think I see them under 3,000. I still see a rookie quarterback, and there's going to be ups and downs for even the best rookie quarterbacks. So that's definitely one that I'm looking at.
I think my big problem, though, with the Bengals defense is with defenses, I don't care about how many points they give up. I don't care if they're going to give up
turnovers and sacks.
Turnovers and sacks. And what does CJ Stroud not do? CJ Stroud has proven he doesn't throw interceptions. And, I mean, I'm looking, he doesn't take a ton of sacks. He had a stretch of 3 games in a row with no sacks. And then the last 3 games, he's had 2, 2, and 3 sacks. So that's, again, probably why I'm just on the Cardinals. Even though the Bengals is obviously a superior defense, you would think for $300 difference, it wouldn't matter. But I just don't think that they're going to give up that many points. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to double check. Houston, oddly enough, that Houston offense is second best in schedule adjusted fantasy points given up to defenses. They're only giving up 3.5 points a game, allowing defenses to score 3.5 points a game. And that's because no sacks, no turnovers.
I do like the Bengals, though, this week. I think that people are sleeping on the fact that the Texans are a completely different team at home and away. 3 out of the 4 games on the road this year, they've scored 19 points or less. That includes scoring 13 points at Carolina. They only scored 19 points at Atlanta. These are bad defenses. And this feels to me like one of those games that, everybody's kind of riding that Texans train. And again, they've had one really good road performance this year. That was at Jacksonville. Outside of that, the offense has just not been the same in those games. But I'm not going to ever, doubt anybody that wants to go against my Falcons right now. It's an absolute mess. The one thing I will say is I'm assuming they're going to try to run the ball because that is definitely, their biggest advantage, as Joe was saying. Yeah, but as Arthur Smith has proved, he'll fuck it up. So
I'm telling you, you can chalk Johnny up for 10 carries this week.
Exactly. The other defense just that kind of intrigues me a little bit is the Jaguars. What happens if something is really wrong with the Niners? Like, what happens if this is a situation where they're going through a spot? Purdy's starting to turn the ball over a little bit more, starting to get sacked. Maybe there's some doubt in it. And that Jacksonville defense is pretty good. Like, they really are. So that would be the other one that I would just maybe consider. But outside of that, it's one of those weeks that all the defenses that, you would be like, oh, I feel great about this. They're all way too expensive for DFS.
I mean,
there's not one that stands out this week that, like, I feel like oftentimes you and I are like, how is this defense $3,000 or $2,800 or whatever? And I don't really think there is one this week where, the Bengals, like, feel fine. Dave's point, it is a team that hasn't turned the ball over a lot or taken sacks despite a bad offensive line.
Yep.
And then, I'm with you, both of you, on if you're rolling the dice on the cheap ones, Cardinals and Jags, I'd steer clear of the Giants. I would say I would,
last week.
I do lean Cardinals over Jags. Jags are a much better defense than the Cardinals, but obviously I just think.
Oh, I would too. I'm just saying
the Falcons have taken a lot of sacks this year.
Get another 100.
I mean, the main problem for me with Jacksonville is I said Houston is number 2 against
who's number 1.
Yeah, exactly. San Francisco is number 1. So I'm pretty locked in on the Cardinals for cash, at least. When it comes to MME, I'm going to take the Cardinals out of my pool, and I'm going to turn the randomness up to about 25%, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, and to your point, like San Francisco, since they only had 2 sacks versus them, Minnesota has been getting a ton of sacks. They only had 1 sack versus them. So, again, it's the points that you're looking for in DFS, they're hard to come by versus San Francisco. Is there any other overall thoughts on this slate that either of you guys have?
Not really. I think just one thing I like about doing these shows too is, talking it out with other people. And usually I do this via text, as you know, Keith. Helps to solidify my own thoughts. Sometimes just even listening to myself talk will help me out, And so I think I've talked myself into a few more things, open my eyes to Dobbs. I probably won't go there. Well, maybe, I don't know. I'm still so up in the air on Burrow with all this injury stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. I'll be interested to play around being able to add Dobbs in there. Like I said, I'm a little more, into some of these guys that we talked about. McBride. I was kind of back and forth between McBride and Hawkinson. I think I've settled on McBride probably. I'm definitely settled on the Cardinals. I'm very interested to see what I can do throwing Hopkins into the mix, because I was already kind of really interested on him. I just needed a push, kind of. And I think Joe kind of gave me that little bit of a push to say, okay, let me start messing with lineups where I don't force a Monra in, and let me just see how it projects.
The last time he mentioned them too was when they played the Falcons. So that's good going for us, right, Joe?
I mean, the projection works out to be the same. They're both projecting about 2.5 value, so I can save $2,300, which I can probably figure out a way to get to CMC. So I'm so tempted to click the button right now and lock in those 3 running backs and just see what happens with Hopkins and Dobbs and McBride and the card. I mean, I pretty much built the entire lineup right there. It's a matter of who those other two ancillary wide receivers are going to be. It's going to kick me like a Michael Thomas or Michael Wilson and like a Jackson Smith and Jigba probably. I'm guessing that's where it's going to take me.
One other guy I did want to mention really quickly is it Charbonnet? Is that how you say? I don't even know how you
Charbonnet?
Yeah.
Charbonnet, yeah.
He is now out snapped Walker in 3 straight games. He's got that questionable tag. Is that somebody maybe we're overlooking in like bigger tournaments at 4,200 this week?
I'm pulling the data now because one thing that I'm always hesitant about is snap data. Snap data can be very, very misleading. I mean, sure. I'm much more interested in touches. Snaps are interesting. If touches are similar, then I look at snaps. But now I want to look to see the last 6 weeks.
I mean,
there's not a lot. There's not a lot.
4 or 5 carries a game.
I know he's on one of my season-long teams, so I know.
Yeah, it's not even close. So 86 to 22. So literally a quarter of the touches. So yeah, I mean he hasn't.
If Walker's out, sure.
Well, that's my question. Because he's dealing with a chest injury and a growing injury and a calf injury. Now they're saying, so I just that's something I would just look towards though. Is if Walker is either scheduled to miss or limited, it's a really low price in your bigger events of somebody who I know again Joe owns him in some fantasy leagues. He's probably dying for him to just get some opportunities. Dave, before we get out here, why don't you tell people where you can find all your great stuff other than just the DFS Den, which everybody should be checking out on Fridays?
I mean, I keep a lot of stuff in our private Discord, to be honest with you. So, unless you're going over to, fantasy 6pack, .net/plans and sign up, be an all access member and hit up that, private Discord. That's where all the good stuff's at.
And it pays for itself.
Oh yeah, of course. But I mean, I dropped some stuff on Twitter on either Wednesdays or Thursdays or Tuesdays or whenever I get a chance. And I know Keith likes it. It's just, it's data driven. It's stuff that, I'm looking at. I mean, it's literally no extra work for me because I'm already looking at this stuff. I just like to put it out there because it's not world changing. It's access that everybody has. Like I said, the good stuff's on the Discord. So that's the stuff where, that's not stuff that you just find wherever. That comes from whatever's
and you
left
get
up
direct
here.
access today, which is the big thing. I mean, you can message him and he'll answer your questions. It's worth it. It really is. He's cashed, I think, in like 90% of his lineups this week that he's given out in the Discord. So, Joe, you got anything going on this week?
No, just dealing with diabetic dogs, man.
Well, that's good. Just don't kill the dog, Joe. That's
goal number one. Goal number one.
If you do, hide the evidence well.
And I mean, really hide it. I appreciate both of you guys again. We're out in Vegas for annual boys trip with my dad and some of my best friends. We have a great time. It's actually a great organization. It's for the Guide Dogs of America. Those are the dogs that are trained that help out people that either have mental
Speaking of your
physical
friends,
disability. Yeah, there's my dad right there. But we are really looking forward to going to the Spear tomorrow night. It's going to be a fun week. So I appreciate you guys getting with us early. Chuck, you can say hello at least.
Covered his face like we can see it anyways.
He's probably trying to hide his Budweiser.
Do a Wildcat parlay for me. Do Arizona to beat Duke on Friday and then beat Colorado on Saturday.
What time's the game Saturday?
Probably hella late. I don't know.
That's the issue because we're leaving Saturday afternoon. But I'll be calling. We'll figure out some props. We'll get to the park card because there's a great NBA slate tonight. We were looking at today. You got like the Sixers, Celtics. I'm pretty sure Wembanyama's in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
We got, I think, the Warriors versus the Nuggets tonight. There's a really good slate of NBA games. So we're going to make some props. But I appreciate both of you taking, your time to do this on a Wednesday. Dave, I hope you and Chris kill it, and I hope he's feeling better.
He's doing a lot better.
That's awesome. For Chris to be not putting out articles and coming on shows, I knew he was sick. So, good luck to your Lions. I'd say good luck to your Giants, Joe, but what's it going to do? It's
There's
like
nothing to be done.
game.
There's nothing to be done.
It's just
We're scouting QBs, baby. That's what time of year it is.
with Danny DeVito.
I've spent about 38 years of my life doing that, Joe. I get it.
Right.
Well, guys, I appreciate it. Y'all have a great one. Be sure to check out all the great work on Fantasy Six Pack, and we'll see you guys next week.